What's up, guys? Welcome back to Restaurant Misfits. And in this episode, I interview Josh Morgan, who is the co-founder and CEO of Sesame Order. Now, Sesame Order is a new concept, a new platform that is looking to completely disrupt the third-party delivery space in the restaurant industry. It's super interesting, and personally, I'm already sold on the concept. I think it's fantastic. Now, in this episode, Josh and I discuss a lot of amazing topics of what's happening in the restaurant space. Everything from how the industry has changed because of COVID and during COVID to what some of the new opportunities that we should be looking forward to over the next couple of years. And we even dive into a few topics in the crypto space and metaverse space. There's just a lot of interesting new opportunities in our industry, and I can't wait for you guys to listen to this episode. And so without further ado, let's dive right in. Hi, my name is Brett Linkletter, CEO and co-founder of Dineline, a restaurant growth agency. Right now, you're listening to our podcast, Restaurant Misfits, where we'll discuss all things related to restaurant marketing, management, and everything else in between growing a restaurant business. Scaling a restaurant today takes much more than having grit and hustle. In this age, it's about utilizing the newest technology available, consistently educating yourself on new platforms and trends, and having a deep understanding of how this industry is so rapidly changing. This podcast is dedicated to keeping you up to speed with the latest and greatest through interviewing the biggest and best in the restaurant industry. Additionally, this podcast is also brought to you in collaboration with Total Food Service. For over 30 years, Total Food Service has provided the restaurant and food service industry with exclusive interviews to the latest news on products, trends, associations, and events. You can sign up for a free monthly subscription by visiting totalfood.com today. And from all the misfits over here, we hope you enjoy the show. Josh, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. You know, January and February are also like very, very busy months for us in general as a business. You know, it's exciting to see us kind of moving away from COVID finally after all these years, which is
thank God
wild. But Josh, for everyone who's just joining right now and learning about you for the first time, maybe they never even heard your name before ever, or any of your brands in the past. Can you give us a quick intro on yourself and kind of what you've done? You have so much experience in this industry, so just kind of quick intro on yourself would be awesome, man.
I'd be happy to. Again, Brett, thanks so much for your time. It's a pleasure to talk shop in the industry and hospitality and restaurants, which is been my passion for most of my career. But my name is Josh Morgan. I'm a career restaurant guy. I've been in this business for almost 20 years. And I've had the good fortune of working for some incredible companies as I've learned the industry and ultimately developed this passion for food and beverage and hospitality. And I started right after college. I went to school in upstate New York and had no idea what I wanted to do in my career and professionally, and had this drive for entrepreneurship and just thought back then, mind you, I'd never worked in a restaurant in my life. So I had this drive for entrepreneurship and thought, me and my buddies living in Chicago were like, hey, maybe the restaurant business is the easiest path towards entrepreneurship. Just shows you how little I knew back then and how naive I was. But anyways, just, ended up jumping into the restaurant business because I thought it was a cool path towards, ownership, business ownership. And anyways, long story short, I've spent the last, 20 years working for great companies. I started with Houston's Restaurant Group, now known as Hillstone, one of the, in my opinion, one of the best operators in the entire country. I traveled around the country for many, many years with them and ended up in New York, had my own restaurant, was part of the Nomad team, which was the Daniel Hume and Will Guidara concept, which was super, super successful. And then, 8 years ago, I joined a company called Orify Brands here in Manhattan. And we were doing the same thing, but in the fast casual space. And we spent the last 8 years building, great fast casual brands. And just recently when COVID hit, and we can dive into this because there's a whole story just about what I'm doing now, but I decided to really try to tackle some fundamental problems in our industry that have been plaguing us for many, many years. And that was the impetus for founding Sesame. And I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sesame, which launched in New York City end of last year. And we've got big, bold, kind of audacious plans of kind of disrupting the space.
Yeah. And going back to how you kind of got in this industry, it's kind of funny. It's like every restaurateur I meet, like you said yourself, we thought, hey, the route to entrepreneurship was the restaurant space. And then we discovered, oh, wow, this is a lot more difficult than we all thought.
Yeah.
And everyone said the same thing in this industry, but it's one of those like, love and hate relationships. I feel like, restaurateurs love what they do, but they also, they know it's difficult. They know it's brutal. They know there's tons of ups and downs, and one of the most difficult types of businesses to run, which is just, it's really interesting. But at the end of the day, we all love it, right? And that's why we're all here. Hillstone, by the way, hey, I just going back to your history. I love Hillstone. Oh my God, like literally Bandera is fantastic. I actually grew up in Orange County.
The Bandera, in Brentwood?
I used to go to the one in Corona Del Mar down in Orange County. And then there was the one in Brentwood, because I lived in Venice Beach, but that one closed down during COVID, I believe, unfortunately.
Oh, did it? So I was at that restaurant. I was working at that restaurant. I lived in LA working with Hillstone, and I was working at the Bandera there for a little while, and then I opened the Santa Monica Houston's.
Nice.
So I know those restaurants. But
love them all, man.
Yeah, your reaction to Hillstone is kind of ubiquitous, right? Like anyone I talk to, and I mention Hillstone, it's just got such a high they do so consumer affinity. It's unbelievable. Very
amazing in every way, shape, and form. Honestly, like amazing operators.
Amazing. Scary operators, mind you. They're not. It's not an easy place to work. Let me tell you that.
I could imagine, man. I mean, it's top to bottom. Everything they do is really, really, really amazing in every way. So, lots of history, lots of different things going on here. In your opinion, you got into now Sesame as of recently, and this is a really, really interesting topic. And it's one of those things where I look at every brand that we look at, that we talk to, I just feel like they feel kind of stuck. Like they feel like they have to use these third party companies to work with. They feel kind of stuck. Like, everyone's doing it, so I kind of have to do it. They all do it, but none of them seem to like it. Tell me more about how did this, in your opinion, how did this all happen? How did we all get stuck in this situation?
I mean, it's an interesting question. It's probably a pretty dense one, that we could dive in deep to kind of the history, but restaurateurs are inherently just very, very good at their space. Like we call them, the four walls of the restaurant. I mean, that's where the magic happens historically, like a great culinary mind, a badass restaurateur that just has a vision of how a guest experience should be. When you come into the restaurant, like the touch points, like it's masterfully, done when executed well. The problem is that as, just the convenience economy started to evolve and change, and so much was happening outside of our four walls. Unfortunately, the restaurant industry is just a little, lagging behind the rest of the world in our ability to, create these digital touch points and interact with our consumers outside of the four walls. And then you have the whole, thing about like, how do I actually execute physical food and get it from point A in my restaurant to point B and control that experience. So it was kind of like, it came on kind of slow in some ways. Like in New York City, like we've been doing delivery, at our brands like Melt Shop since, like 2010, 2011, because New York was just dense. We were always doing delivery. Seamless was created in New York City. But in the I'd say the year or two leading up to COVID, just it was like an inflection point where, this convenience economy really took everyone by storm. And it was really driven by Silicon Valley and these tech companies that figured out a way how to get in front of consumers, and, kind of, dangle a carrot of convenience and, accessing your favorite brands. And that's why restaurateurs jumped in, because it was new and it was novel, and like they were good at it. Like they were supposedly bringing us new customers that we had never talked to or seen. And it's very compelling to be like, hey, I've got fixed cost and I've got excess capacity in my four walls. If you can bring me a new revenue stream with the same, team members, minimal, increase in labor, it's super compelling. The problem is when you get in it and then you realize you were kind of duped. Like some of the things that they promised us weren't so true. Like number one, new customers, right? In fact, what inevitably happens is they were just taking our existing customers and driving them through their channels, which is less profitable for us. And this whole notion of like incremental revenue, it doesn't pan out. Like the numbers don't work, right? Like it,
So wait,
and
so
the
in your
reality.
opinion, it's not worth it then? Is that a fair statement? Or is it?
Well, so look, sales, there's a saying, sales cure all problems, right? So
Yeah.
incremental sales is an attractive thing, but what ultimately keeps business sustainable is incremental profit, right? Like you got to make money off of any sale that you're doing. And I think the reality of what happened and why restaurants feel stuck, which is kind of getting back to your original question. I may have taken a little bit off road there, but restaurateurs feel stuck because they're kind of addicted to the incremental sales. There are sales. I mean, these platforms are good at driving business
Yeah.
because they've spent years and tens of millions of dollars figuring out sophisticated ways to bring consumer demand. But when you look at your P&L at the end of the month, it's like, wait, what the hell's happening?
Yeah.
Like my profit center of in-house is shrinking, and my profit center of off-premise is growing, but I'm not generating profit from it. So
Yeah.
restaurateurs are stuck essentially because they know consumers want it, they know there's demand for it, they have a tough time implementing and executing themselves through their own channels. And once you're on the dole, like once
Figure it off.
it's kind of like it's like once
Yeah.
you're on the teat, it's hard to pull off. But I got to tell you, what's fascinating is that as we talk about Sesame and our mission and our vision to create a more sustainable ecosystem for restaurateurs, creating a truly restaurant first
Yep.
system, there are a lot of bold entrepreneurs and restaurateurs that are literally saying, you know what, go F yourselves, Grub and DoorDash and Uber. And
Totally.
they're really starting to have conviction around being a cog in the wheel of creating more sustainability, and they're putting their money where their mouth is, you
Yeah.
know?
I respect that. I mean, and you said something earlier too, that like restaurateurs are just generally speaking behind other industries. Like why is that too? Because I feel the same way. I mean, you don't know much about what we do as a company, but here at Dineline, our agency, we help restaurants grow and scale through digital marketing. And it's literally, we talked about 30 owners a day, probably. And it's like there's such resistance to technology. Like, what is that a cultural thing? Like, why is that the case? Why do you think?
It's interesting, and as soon as you said digital marketing, I was like, oh, I know exactly the conversations that you have because I've had them
For sure.
myself with
Yeah.
all sorts of agencies. And look, I don't know. I think there's a couple things. Number one, it's a highly fragmented industry, right? And there's something called
Yeah.
aggregation theory, which really helps dictate what we're seeing in the proliferation of all of these big marketplaces. Because the more fragmented an industry is, the more susceptible it is to players like DoorDash and Grub, and it's unbelievable how much market share they've taken. But the there's just everything. Like there's so many different restaurants, there's so many different technology solutions. There's a little bit of that predisposition to kind of be a bit of an old school operator. Like operators are old school, like the people
Yeah.
that really like Hillstone, like they become advanced technologically speaking, but it's all about like service touch points. It's like the Danny Meyer, like mantra of the 51 percenters. Like, it's an art. It's not really a science. It's not tech. Hospitality isn't tech. Tech can help make hospitality easier to execute at scale, but then the action of just like taking care of a guest, creating a meaningful experience within the four walls of everything that you control, that takes art, and I
100%.
think the industry, it's like when and restaurateurs are artists, they're creatives,
Yeah.
they're culinary, innovators. So it's just so easy to just focus on the important things of taking care of guests and resisting kind of overcomplicating things with tech. And I think because of that, just the industry as a whole just has slowly kind of fell behind
Yeah.
some of the things that were happening in other industries.
100%. I mean, and here's the thing too, like if you look at the third party apps, like they do solve a major pain point for a lot of restaurateurs, which is, look, being able to supply online ordering for your brand, supplying the driver, there is some discovery space to it. So I get it too. Um, it seems like since COVID, a ton of point of sale systems and other companies have just popped up out of nowhere, started doing also direct online ordering, right?
Yep.
Uh,
It's a heavily competitive space.
Incredibly. What are your thoughts on it exactly? I mean, is it like, have you seen many restaurateurs like been successful at it? Because from what we see, it's like everyone's trying to help these restaurants do it, but at the end of the day, are are many people using online ordering? I like direct with restaurants. Personally, I don't see it a lot. Right?
So it's interesting. I think when you ask consumers, and this is kind of the classic, I think, survey effect, whether you're talking about restaurant ordering or whether you're talking about environmentalism, right? When you ask consumers, how do they want to order? Most consumers say they want to order from the restaurants. Like they say they want to help the restaurant. And I think there's this implicit understanding that if I go to the restaurant, it's probably a little bit better for them. And I think there was actually a survey that that we saw and studied where it asked these questions. And number one was there was a belief that it was better. And number two, there was a belief that if something went wrong with the order, there was a higher likelihood that it would be resolved when dealing directly with the restaurant.
For sure.
So consumers want to do that. The problem is humans are somewhat lazy, you know, and not lazy in a bad way, but it's like we want convenience. Like we want things to happen quick, to be seamless. And that's something that the aggregators are masterful at, you know, like high quality UX and interface, digital experience. You can literally find a restaurant, click a couple buttons and have an order confirmed in seconds, like 3 button touches, you know? And that's the thing that consumers really want. And, you know, it's hard to give that up to help restaurants, right? But back to kind of set a bit of a stage to your question, as I see it, which is, you know, highly competitive space, you know, tons of online ordering channels. There's really 2 primary ways consumers can interact with restaurants and order food. There's in the marketplace space, which we know there's 3 operators. That's it. It's consolidated to 3: Grub, DoorDash, and Uber Eats through all these acquisitions, at least in the US. And then there's something that we call first party, right? So that's like our brand Melt Shop, which is a killer, you know, American sandwich concept that launched in New York. You know, there's the meltshop.com. So a consumer can go direct to either the web app, they can download a custom Melt Shop app, and they can order that way. There's tons of competitors in this first party online space, you know, Olo, Lunchbox, Go Parrot. Like it's almost like there's new ones, Pop Menu every day. And that's really a B2B play, right? Because it's like, hey, I have a tech stack where I can go to you, Brett, the restaurateur, and I can say, I'm going to empower you with technology that enables you to run your first party channel. And it might be great. Some are great, some are mediocre, some are shit. You know, that's just the spectrum. But here's the rub is that, Brett, you now as the restaurateur, you have to figure out how to get the consumer to go to your channel, right? Yeah. Whereas on the B2C marketplace, which just to be clear, that's where Sesame is kind of playing. You know, you get the tech stack, you get high quality UX, but you also get, you know, demand gen, you get, you know, consumer outreach and marketing kind of built in, which a lot of restaurateurs, especially on the smaller side, like it's so hard running a business. Like they have no time figuring out digital acquisition.
That's what I was going to ask you, because I completely agree, right? It's like they have this mentality that if I build it, they will come. It's like, so before we did restaurants, we did a lot of e-commerce, right? And like e-commerce business owners that are successful fully get this concept. Obviously, like you have to build a site that's optimized for sales, and we need to drive traffic to it. This is what they do. They live on the internet. Yep. You have a restaurateur say, well, you know, we got the Square online ordering and no one's ordering. Well, yeah, you got to drive traffic, man.
There's no distribution. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So yeah, there are a lot of pieces to it for it to be successful. So on that note, let's talk about Sesame. So how does it work exactly? What is kind of the pain point that you guys are solving, and how does it fit into the market?
So the primary pain point is just, you know, huge levels of contentiousness and animosity amongst the industry. You know, again, we're restaurateurs. We've been living and breathing operations and building brands for years and years, right? And we see it firsthand, and we all hated it. Like back, you know, to the conversation we had just a little bit ago. It was like we were open to seeing how it would work, but then when we started to see the signs that they were taking and monopolizing our business, we didn't like it. This was pre-COVID. When COVID hit, it's like, you know, on-premise sales dropped to like nothing. We were in New York. We got pummeled in COVID, and off-premise sales were like, you know, 60, 70, sometimes even 80% of sales, right? So we were like, no, this definitely doesn't work. And when we went out and started talking to restaurateurs, it's just like everybody hates it. Like they feel like, I talked to one guy that called Grubhub the mafia, like literally. Yeah. And if you think about, and this gets to kind of how Sesame is different. Primarily how Sesame is different. We think there's a lot of reasons, but the current playbook is based on commission rates, right? So a percentage of all sales, you know, go to these platforms. And it's also predicated on things like closed customer data, meaning the customer that orders on Grubhub is Grubhub's customer, not Melt Shop's or, Five Guys or any of the brands that really should benefit from customer data. So we just throw that out the window, and we just do, we look at it as like a SaaS model. So we're going to create just a basic platform fee that's capped, that doesn't go up. You can do as many orders as you want. And we're going to give you access to open customer data. So right there, we're doing a couple things. We are creating a much fairer system, and one that results in much higher levels of contribution margin to the restaurant, right? Because we only make X amount, and then anything above is the restaurants, as it should be, right?
Does it operate kind of similarly to like Uber Eats or Grubhub, but in the sense that it's consumer facing and you can have multiple restaurants on it?
Yeah.
Okay,
the utility, so the utility is very similar. I mean, look, honestly, we spent a good amount of money, and we hired an incredible firm called Frog Design to help us build the marketplace product. So the consumer-facing web app, but it's a marketplace. It's search and discovery. It's got high quality digital experiences and UX and UI, and you can literally find a restaurant, like I was saying earlier, 3 buttons. You can be a checkout like that. So we put a lot of effort into the functionality of it, because of what I said earlier. We ask consumers, what's most important to you? It's like convenience, remembering my credit card number, making sure that I have all my addresses.
I can already see this, man. This is no, seriously, this is really good. This is amazing. We're a huge pain point.
I love your excitement, because we're super enthused as well. But we also know this is a long game. I mean, we're going against some behemoths. But this reminded me of something you said earlier, which I kind of wanted to touch on, which is, I think in the early days, the brands that got in and built out those first party channels way early. I'm talking about 2010, 11, 12. Like Sweetgreen and Shake Shack, and and we're talking millions of dollars, right? To create that really high experience, high quality experience. Some of those brands have been successful at doing the first party thing, right? For our contention is that for the average independent mom and pop, badass restaurateur, it's going to be very difficult for them to succeed with a destination channel only. And the reason, I mean, think about it, it makes sense. Every single restaurant has an app. Every single restaurant has an e-commerce, engine, right? It might be powered by a POS. It might be powered by, Squarespace, who knows? But consumers do not want to go to 100 different places with 100 different experiences. And you don't need to look further than Amazon and the extreme market share penetration that people like DoorDash have achieved over the last, 24 months, because consumers want convenience. So I just wanted to touch on that. There are brands that are killing it at it, and I've got mad respect for them. Domino's has been doing this for 20 years, like delivery, owning their first party, really refusing to give it up to the
Domino's is a straight up tech company. They really are at this point.
They're unbelievable. They're unbelievable. So I was just gonna say, like, that's what's going on here, right? Like, I feel like the industry, and this might be a little bit of a provocative comment, but I think the industry has been trying to solve a problem in a little bit of the wrong way, which is, like you said, if there's no such thing as we build it and they'll come, like, not anymore, so you can't just build destination channels. You have to sell your products in a way that makes sense to the consumer and according to the way they want to order, so Sesame is trying to kind of live in between those two options. Like, we're trying to own that, like, Venn diagram of the overlap of the best of both worlds, best economics, like a first party, and functionality, utility, convenience of a third party app.
And are you guys launching just in New York?
So we're launched. So we launched a prototype. So essentially, we spent all of COVID, like literally April of 2020, I was like, it's time to shake things up. We spent a good couple of months just kind of creating a business case, talking to investors and partners. We started building, in early last year, and we built everything proprietary. So we've got a web app, we've got a full back end ordering, engine, and just everything was architected in a proprietary way, and we're super happy with how it turned out. So we launched a prototype at the end of last year, and it's a very specific, small prototype. We've got about 50 great restaurants in New York. We've got a limited geography, and the reason for that is look, when you launch tech, it's like you never get it 100% right the first time. So we've been in this test and learn phase the last 6-8 weeks, and we're constantly just like testing something, talking to consumers, building something new, talking to consumers, and really trying to get at, the value and, honing in on product market fit. And we're just on the precipice of starting to roll out a lot more restaurant supply and new geographic areas in New York.
Got it. So talking about the marketing component to it. So how do you guys driving traffic to it for the restaurants? How can they utilize the platform in that way?
So one way, which is kind of central to our thesis, specifically at scale, which is, let's say it's your restaurant, Brett, and you're on Grub and you're on Uber, and Uber comes in one day and you're paying them 25%. And they're like, hey, Brett, we would love to do a marketing campaign. I want you to push all of your customers to order on Uber. You'd be like, why the hell would I do that? Like, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to push them to go on the channel that's most advantageous for me economically,
For sure.
Right? So those guys are on the opposite sides of the table of the restaurant industry. Sesame, we set out to sit on the literal same side as our restaurant partners. And the way we do that is through that zero commission, SaaS model. We give them access to the customers. And, with restaurants that are having a tough time managing, like you said, their own first party channel, it's like, where's the traffic? Like, how do I get people? So we're basically saying, we now have alignment. Like if we bring you orders and you help promote Sesame to your consumers, you win, because the economics are much better than they're certainly much better than third party orders.
Yeah.
But in many cases, they're better than even orders that come on their own first party channel, because first party 100%. Channels are expensive. So now we have alignment. So there's this flywheel effect that we can now work together instead of, restaurants. Yes. Literally, there's entire businesses. One called Bicky that just comes to mind. I'm a friend. He's a very talented CEO.
I'm on the podcast too. Abhinav.
Oh, you did? He's awesome.
Yeah.
Abhinav, he's great. But their whole business model, or one of their business models, is predicated on how do we fight against the aggregators to steal the customers that they stole from us. You know what I mean? It's like,
I still got to talk to him about how the hell he does that. I'm like, how are you even doing this? I need to know these secrets.
Yeah. So
incredible.
Exactly. So when you imagine like the current players in the current paradigm, they're all fighting each other for the same customers. What happens? Customer acquisition goes through the roof, the cost. So we're trying to align with them and say, hey, we're gonna bring customers. You're gonna promote to your fans and like all the people that love your brand, and we're gonna work at it together where you ultimately benefit. And at scale, the customer acquisition costs actually go down.
Got it.
We call it kind of the many to many approach, and it's super interesting. It's building a marketplace ain't easy, because we're building supply and demand at the same time. So it's we're constantly learning, again, test and learn on marketing side. We're also initiating, we're doing traditional digital media, so we've got digital media campaigns running that we're constantly learning from. We're learning a little bit about our kind of target consumer and our customer segments, and so there's a lot that we're doing. There's a PR angle. We think what we're, the mission behind what we're doing, which we haven't even really talked about. We talked about a little bit about the mission of Sesame and helping restaurants, but we have other big missions as well.
What you guys are doing though, I can already see it. Because we speak to so many owners on a daily basis. It's ridiculous. And literally the biggest pain point is exactly this. Hey, COVID forced us to shut our doors. We had no option but third party. Some cases, the client's sales actually went up during COVID because everyone kind of gave up. And, let's just say someone stayed open, but their sales went up, but their profits went completely down the drain. So they're working like maybe even harder, but for less money at the end of the day because the apps are taking everything. So they're like, this is terrible. Like, this is one of the worst things like ever. Like, we're working twice as hard. It's even more difficult to get employees too. And at the same time, we're getting less.
It's like a perfect storm, and we can extrapolate that further, which is actually in my opinion, more of an existential threat, in that these companies are already making it hard for us, right? They're taking consumers, they're cannibalizing our business, they've got us on lockdown, and then once they get to a certain point, they become true monopolies, and they have true pricing, control. There's no question they are losing tons of money. They are going to continue to charge restaurants or consumers or both, right? That's one of the only ways they can make it work. But here's the other thing, is that they know how difficult it is to make money or to be profitable. So now they're starting to do things like open up their own virtual brands and cloud kitchens and essentially become vertically integrated. So now people like DoorDash are trying to own the entire supply chain of restaurants, effectively creating their own restaurants and displacing the very clients that they're supposed to be helping, right?
If
So
so it's this, I mean, just like Amazon too. Obviously, Amazon has their own brands.
exactly.
This is actually really scary, but I had a friend years ago that was getting really big on the Amazon space, having a lot of success. And eventually one day his sales just stopped. And he was curious what was going on. And he looked on Amazon, and his listing, he thought maybe it was removed, and it was still there. And actually what Amazon had done is they had removed him as a seller and replaced their own with the exact same product and just took over that market share. They completely just like, see ya, we're going to start selling the same thing. We know there's a demand for it. And and that was it.
It's
and
crazy. So there, I heard a story from a good friend. It was in Chicago, and this very smart, like innovative restaurateur created this cool, very niche sandwich concept. It was based on a Chinese a type of Chinese food, like a Chinese sandwich, and they opened it in a cloud kitchen or in a dark kitchen, right? With one of these big players. I'm not going to mention the name, but a month later, that same cloud kitchen owner ripped the brand, created their own virtual, and started selling the exact same thing in the same facility, And it was like, I mean, it's the exact story you just said, except
brutal
in the restaurant world, and this is happening. I mean, data is king, right? I mean, it really is, right? So these guys have such vast amounts of data, consumer ordering history, preferences, what's trending. And with that data and their intention to build facilities to execute, food operations, there's a lot to be scared of, as a restaurateur and as an advocate for the industry. We shouldn't, we shouldn't be playing ball so easily, and it's like, Sesame was kind of like our attempt.
Look, I've heard a lot of different stories from a lot of different people's opinions on what's kind of happening in the restaurant space now and what's going to be happening in the future. A lot of people are saying the new trend that we can expect over the next, 5 to 10 years is that there's going to be more and more demand for delivery. It's going to keep going up, and there's going to be less and less people going out. And if you are going out, it's going to be very, very premium brands, very, very premium experiences. Do you agree with that?
I agree with some of those things. I certainly agree with the continued trend of off-premise and delivery. I mean, if you look at, you can look to China, and which is a much more evolved market when it comes to, off-premise and delivery, and the numbers are staggering. So that trend's not going anywhere. I don't know. I think there has to be a consolidation of number of brick and mortars, right? Like the number of concepts just blew up too much over the last, decade and a half. And I think part of that, we don't have to go down the economics road, but I studied macroeconomics and I love talking about it. But I just think it's, there's just been a fuel of liquidity, an onslaught of liquidity that has found itself in our industry, really trying to find who's going to be the next Chipotle, who's going to be the next Shake Shack. And it spurred so much, competition. So first of all, I think, and COVID kind of was a bit of a potential recorrection because, there's just too many concepts. So that's number one. There has to be a consolidation just to match supply and demand. But I do think that as that consolidation continues to occur, that, on-premise dining will certainly be a little bit, maybe, more experiential, in that, consumers, let's just say in 3 years, 5 years, just so much of their weekly, habits involve ordering things, whether it be the groceries, whether it be produce, whether it be pharmacy and food, of course. So when they do go out, they really want to go out to the place with friends where, killer bartenders, just great, great execution of food, like that old school hospitality. But I think what I would suggest is that can exist across the whole spectrum, right? Like you can go to a fast casual concept and it could be just like your, the part of your day when you're back in the office and you just want to get out, walk in your neighborhood and go visit some people that actually see you as a recurring guest, So you can have good experiences at the fast casual level all the way up to the fine dining. I just think you're right. I think it's going to be, people are going to crave that experiential component in the brands that they walk into,
100%. And a lot of people say also hey, obviously during COVID, it just sped up a lot of the tech in the restaurant space. I mean, even for us too, We built a whole software platform too during this time to help us basically manage more clients and get better results. And for us, it was like something we always thought about. And then it was like, we literally have to do this now because the demand actually to get help when it comes to driving and traffic online just went through the roof. Everyone needed it because people aren't walking around anymore, right?
Yep.
Since all these changes, I mean, and basically maybe based on what you've learned over the last couple of years, what do you think are some of the new opportunities in the restaurant space right now?
Oh man. I mean, on the tech side specifically,
Yeah.
it's still completely fragmented, like there's just so much going on. And I think part of that is over the last 2 years, the problems in the industry are so vast that there's a lot of people that want to try to solve them, so
For
in the
sure.
meantime, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. I think where the trend is going is more to like back to like kind of this one-stop shop solution, like these big POS companies like Toast, who I
Yeah.
think is a great company. They've really built a much better mouse wheel, hamster wheel, to solve some of the challenges with POS. Legacy POSs are disastrous for restaurant operations.
Yeah.
So we're starting to see a bit of like a full stack that, they're acquiring companies. So they're doing things from the POS and orders to, full kitchen displays to CRMs to, digital to loyalty systems, so I think that's a trend. And what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot of these independent, newly created companies get acquired and they're going to be, rolled up. So I think there's going to be a consolidation of the tech space.
Well, ultimately, it sounds like
Yeah.
it's mostly tech focused opportunities. I mean, and this is something that I think most restaurateurs need to wake up to. It's just like start embracing it versus resisting it. I'm kind of curious for you too. I mean, you've worked with so many brands in the past, and obviously, it sounds like you have a pretty good background in all things related to restaurants, whether it's within the four walls or tech related. In your experience, what have you seen as some of the most creative ways upon uh, overall restaurant growth, driving customer traffic? What were some of the strategies you guys worked with in the past? Some of the brands you've done in the past? Anything in particular
I
that
mean,
stands out?
I wish I could share a little bit more of our personal experiences, but like for instance, at Orify Brands, we're at about 120 restaurants across six different brands. You would
Yep.
think a company that got to that size would have really mastered, digital customer acquisition and understood how to maximize, paid social and paid media across different channels. And you know what? It's been so new to us. And I think it's not indicative of us not figuring it out. Like we've had successful campaigns, Melt Shop and Fields Good Chicken. Some of our brands are doing some awesome stuff,
I spoke
but
to
it's
actually
just,
Fields too on the podcast, by the way. We had them on too.
oh, no way.
They're a cool
Yeah.
brand. Yeah.
Great brand.
But okay, but you said something
So
there
like,
though.
I couldn't tell you that but what I think is happening now, it's amazing. It's seeing, like, I think social commerce is
Yeah.
like, we're just at the beginning of it. It's like version one was like, let's have a website. And then version two, it's like, let's have a website, but also be on a platform. And now it's like, you know, consumers are just buying so much on social media platforms, whether it's just Instagram and all the integrations that are available. And you can, stand up shops on all these platforms. And now with TikTok, I mean, there's not a restaurateur in the industry that is not trying to figure out how to get and penetrate in TikTok. And
Wait,
it's like,
really? Because
oh
okay,
my
because
God.
that was actually, and I was thinking about asking you about TikTok, but I wasn't sure because I'm on TikTok. I think it's an incredible platform. I think there's tons of opportunity, and I'll tell you also from what I've heard from our clientele is there's a very low level of trust with Facebook right now. And it's not just in our industry. It's like, hey, obviously their stock took a massive hit. What was it, last week or 2 weeks ago? I mean, they are getting rocked right now by TikTok. I mean, like it is. Look,
It's crazy.
I spent over 15 million on ads over the last 5 years. So this is what we do.
Wow.
These guys are getting destroyed. Our budgets on Facebook, by the way, uh, very minimal in comparison to what we did just 2 years ago. I mean, like very minimal. Ad costs have gone up an insane amount. Organic reach is just basically nothing. So you have no organic reach. And if you want to pay for your reach, it's just ridiculous at this point.
Yeah.
So what are the other options? Well, as it relates to social, I mean, TikTok is really it. So you're saying you're seeing a lot of restaurants actually hopping on TikTok these days. That's
Oh my
amazing.
God. Well, I think everyone is starting to feel, like the momentum of it. And again, like we're late, like TikTok's been going on for a while. So like,
Yeah.
the millennial Gen Z, like, I mean, they've been owning this for a while now, but the restaurant, the business side is starting to we're noticing it. And I think most brands are trying to figure out how to do it because it's like, it's new, and it's not easy. It's not easy just to turn it on, but a lot of, like, everybody's talking about it. And like, I met this great, restaurant operator, new burger concept in the city. I went into a shop and we hung out and we chatted.
Yeah.
He was awesome. He built his brand on TikTok. Like he didn't even do it. He opened the doors. It did relatively well. There was a ton of consumers that were on TikTok that were sharing, UGC and just promoting this brand. It went viral. Next thing you know, he's got lines out the door, and he didn't even realize that the virality was fueled exclusively on TikTok.
Oh yeah.
So it's another
it's
whole
like,
world.
Are you on TikTok personally?
I am, but I'm not actively. Like I'm doing it, kind of exploring a little bit, trying to get a sense of how Sesame might be able to start utilizing it. And we've done some deep dives with some TikTok influencers, and just to kind of get their perspective on how we might best tackle it.
I got on probably mid 2020 out of curiosity too, because people started asking me about it. And I thought it was just a bunch of like young kids, but it's actually not. You're getting an older demographic now, and my clients started asking me about it. So I said, okay, I got to learn this thing. It is incredible what you can do as far as organic reach. Like, really, you can go get 1 million views like that within a week.
We should honestly, like, now that I'm hearing all this about you and your background and digital, and like, we should do a sidebar conversation, because I'd love to learn a little bit more about just your experience, man, and best practices, because we're kind of talking about these things all the time.
Yeah, and then actually on that note, I mean, my next question is, and I definitely would love to have a sidebar conversation with you about this. You mentioned digital customer acquisition. So how are we doing this? You said some of the big brands you were working with, 120 plus stores, still not a very high understanding of actually digital customer acquisition. This is the biggest problem in the industry from what I see from a marketing perspective. I mean, you see all these brands spending tons of money on marketing and all these different channels, both traditional and more modern, and you cannot track the ROI. You can't see if it actually works. And the funny thing about it too, we always hear it, but there's also such a resistance to even admitting that they can't track an ROI. I mean, I train my sales team on this all the time. I'll say, okay, so ask them what they're doing. What are you currently doing to bring in new customers? And they'll say, we're on social media and we're boosting some posts here and there. Okay, and how's it bringing in new customers? Well, we're reaching people in the area. Okay, but can you track sales? Well, no, but you can see the engagement. I was like, okay, but you can't deposit likes into the bank. You can't, right? Like, and it's like they try so hard to move away from the question, when the reality is they're spending money and they don't know if it's working.
Totally.
It's really interesting.
You're right. It's a big challenge, and like figuring out how, for brands that are kind of at the point where they're a little bit grown up, they've got a couple locations, they're really starting to expand. They want to maybe open up a new market, and they want to figure out how to in a somewhat sophisticated way get customers. Like, it's a struggle. And it's a struggle not just for us as the industry, but finding the right resources and finding the right performance marketing teams, finding the right creative teams to kind of help iterate on the messaging. We struggle with that at Sesame. It's just how do we efficiently and effectively iterate like a creative ad that we're posting on Facebook and Insta, but then like how do we utilize programmatic, and is there a return on that?
Let me tell you a quick tip that is actually super easy, that anyone can do without any technical experience, that is just purely a creative little twist that will help you guys greatly, and anyone else listening to this, by the way. Literally, so many people, when it comes to ads, they will just bust their ass to create 15 to 20 ads every week, and they'll just push them out nonstop, right? And hey, respect if you can do that. Like, that's a lot of work to run something and see if it actually, quote, works. Well, restaurant space, biggest issue is they don't even know if it's works. So that's a whole nother issue to deal with. But for you guys, for example, let's just say you wanted to acquire people to download your app or sign up or whatever. There's a specific KPI we can measure, which is a sign up, right?
Yep.
Now, we're gonna determine whether this ad is successful or not based upon us getting a sign up, right? Now, most people in your case, or with similar companies, again, they're gonna create tons of ads on a weekly basis. We're going to test them all at $100 a day budget, all of them, to see what happens. And then we're going to scale what works. No. Instead, what most people should be doing is focus on just maybe a couple per week. It could be even just one, 2, or 3 ads per week. But here's the difference. You put more time and energy into those 1, 2, or 3 ads that capitalize on the problem and solution, like typical, you would imagine, and then change the intro, which is just the first 2 to 3 seconds, with 10 different variations. So create 2 ads, that's it, that are maybe a minute long, but they each have 10 different intros. That way you can actually see if somebody's gonna work or not, because you might have a killer ad, but the intro just sucked. And
Yeah,
so no one
the
even
first,
got to
the
the
first second, 2 second is the most important thing, huh?
That's
you gotta
it.
like
And
it.
this, by the way, this same strategy applies to TikTok. So if you're on TikTok, you post some video that would have been crazy viral, but the beginning sucked, but you feel very strongly about it, change the intro for the first 2, 3 seconds, rinse and repeat, run it.
Yeah, no, you're totally. I think you're right, and we've kind of done something similar to what you're suggesting. Like the most campaigns we run is 4, and then we've done a couple like true A/B testing. You know, where we're filtering traffic to 4 different versions and really looking at various metrics and KPI. This is all very high level, top of funnel, and then we're kind of further figuring out like which ad is is resulting in some sort of like mid funnel conversion metrics, like clicking on a restaurant or like looking at the menu and adding to cart. So but I would love to learn a little bit more from your playbook, no doubt.
For sure, man. No, and again, I mean, literally, I think in the first 30 seconds, as you were describing your product, I could already see the value in it. I mean, literally, like, oh my God, I think you guys should sell the hell to this thing. Like, I literally, this is the easiest sales pitch of all time.
Oh, to be honest, like it's on the sales pitch on the restaurant side, thankfully, it's like, it sells it's so corny to say that, but it kind of sells itself, right? Like
I'm
like
already sold, man.
When we go into a restaurant's door and we just we share like, hey, we're not Silicon Valley and we're not salespeople. We're restaurateurs trying to fix this fucked up system, and we just share a little bit about what we're doing. Everyone's like, count me in. The only challenge is like the rest, which is like the technological integrations. We have partnerships with a lot of companies, middleware companies, to help onboard quickly. So that can become a little challenging because, like I said, it's so fragmented. But the sales side is easy. I think even on the consumer side, honestly, the mission that we are offering, and I think we've done a decent job. It's not, we have a lot of work to do, but I think we've done a good job at articulating kind of our reason to believe, right, to consumers. And because of that, we've gotten a lot of traffic, to our site. The thing that we're really trying to fine tune, which is what is the primary reason to order, right? Like, and we offer a lot of what we call functional benefits, like, curation of restaurants, like execution of the order, quick delivery. Like we actually have a logistics system that we can deliver in under 30 minutes, like almost anywhere from any restaurant, right? So there's all these functional benefits that lower fees, like price transparency. So they're all of value to consumers. We're just trying to figure out which ones lead to the highest level of conversion,
Yeah. So well, you guys test them all those different angles.
Yeah, we're literally that's kind of our test and iterate approach right now. It's like we have like we'll have like 4 different versions of a homepage, with different value props, and we look at the trended funnels, and see what happens.
There's something that, this is a little off topic, but there's something that's really scary about ads, and I've learned in general. You learn a lot about people, right? You see what people are attracted to. You almost have like God view of the world when you're spending some serious budgets, because you're like, ooh, I can see the trends in this or that or whatever. What's really freaky about ads is you can also predict buying behaviors. And this is what scares me about Facebook, by the way, because if for me as an advertiser, I can see that if person does X, Y, and then Z happens, and I can see that as an advertiser, talk about, your background in macroeconomics, what can Facebook see at the macro level, what's happening in the world? I mean, maybe it sounds crazy, but I swear to God, I swear to God that Zuckerberg has a knob that he can just turn forward and just look at what 6 months in the future looks like if he really wanted to.
Yeah, no,
I'm not kidding. Like it sounds insane, but there's truth to it. They have so much data, and I think people are starting to kind of catch up into this, and I think that people are kind of scared. I mean, when Facebook announced that they wanted to be Meta too, what that did also was it just creeped out the crypto community, creeped me out too. Hey, we're already glued to our phones as is. Now you want to put something on our eyeballs that we live in this Facebook world? Dude, this is insane.
It's pretty heavy and intense, like where a lot of this like current Web 2.0 is going, or where it could go.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's like, I think there's an interesting parallel to this conversation and kind of what we're doing at Sesame, at least how we're trying to think about it, is in the sense that, like we've been diving deep a little bit just in learning a little bit more about, what big vision could look like how we can really disrupt, how we can, again, we're all about trying to provide sustainability and equity back into the system. And currently, like with the Facebooks of the world, Instagram, like you name it, like even DoorDash and Grub, it's like, this like Web 2, Web 3 is like this big thing. So Web 2.0 is this very exploitative, approach where it's like all of the users, the consumers, the restaurants, right, are injecting value and creating it into this platform, of which Grub sits at the top, and they extract all that value, and then they give that value to shareholders, right?
Yep.
So Web 3.0, or like what it could be and how we're starting to think about it. Mind you, when we founded Sesame, it was built on this grand vision of a cooperative, right? Like, what if we as restaurateurs banded together, like old school cooperative, like we're all in it together, we all share. And what we're trying to understand is like, what are the little, like the levers that we can kind of play with to create a truly sustainable model where it's the opposite of the Facebook and DoorDash model, where it's like the restaurants, the consumers, oh, and by the way, the couriers, right? The couriers are such an integral part of this ecosystem, which no one really talks about. What if all of these people that contribute value into a platform, maybe at some future it's decentralized, but those same people are the recipients of the value of the network, And
I think epic.
I think there's some crazy things going on with, and then a lot of this is like, fueled by blockchain technology and not necessarily crypto, but there's this very interesting, at least in my opinion, kind of,
there's going to be
momentum going on that I want to keep. We're excited about keeping our pulse on it so that we can better understand how to disrupt an industry that's so big.
I'm still trying to figure out how restaurants can use like NFTs and get more in the crypto space in general. And I think we're not there yet, but I like you're saying, there's as this evolves more and more.
Well, you know about Flyfish, right? Gary Vaynerchuk, VCR Group. You haven't heard about these guys?
Well, I know Gary Vee and what he's I know he's got his his toes dipped into this whole space right now.
He's been doing NFTs for a while. So he partnered with a friend of mine named Dave Rodolitz, great restaurant guy, operator, and a chef named Josh Capon. Yeah. And they are launching a membership sushi restaurant in Manhattan. Like think like, Soho House or, some high-end club, right? Membership. And they tokenized it. So the memberships are NFTs. And they did a pre-sale, right? So it's going to be built next year, and there's going to be a membership place where you can go eat killer sushi, right? But they executed it as an exclusive membership, and they were first time it's ever been done, at least that I know of. But so they were a first mover in the space, and they utilized crypto and blockchain to do it. They raised $15 million. They sold $15 million.
See where I'm, but I'm also kind of hung up on the NFT space, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but built within our service offering, we actually do have a subscription model like the Soho House kind of thing for restaurants. I don't want to, we could talk about that on the sidebar, but I don't want to get too deep into that right now because most of the public doesn't even know about this yet and they're going to freak. But I keep wondering, okay, so NFT, let's go back to that. So you buy the token or the NFT or whatever, and then now you're a member for life. Is there any kind of subscription plan to it, or is it just a one-time purchase?
No, it's a one-time purchase. It grants you access, but it's an asset, right? So if the value, and this gets back to what I was kind of getting at, right? Like if members are contributing value to some system, then owning that NFT, which is a token, if that can go up in value commensurate with the value that's created in this membership. So if it becomes like the hottest club in New York City, like it makes sense that the value could go up, right?
Ooh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
So really you own it, but I could own it now, which grants me access. Mine, by the way, when I go there, I gotta pay full price. Like it doesn't get me like food, I still it just gets me in the door.
Access. Okay, so you're a
member. But I could sell it to you, and then you could sell it to someone else, right?
I see.
And I think back to your question, I think there's some really interesting ways that restaurateurs can get into crypto. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of it either, but I think there's the famous chefs, like imagine, like Danielle Ballou, like, creating an NFT of his first, Danielle menu, things like that. And I think some of them are a little bit more, I don't know what the right word is, but like novelty,
Yeah.
like that's a cool thing. He owns it. It's novelty. It kind of fuels the fire of crypto.
Yeah.
But what I'm more interested in is more of like the long-term sustainability plays using blockchain. Like how do we like think about reshaping an entire industry? Because
Yeah.
it's all you gotta do is follow the money, right? It's like
Yeah.
the companies that are built on extraction of value at the demise of the players in the system, like it can't be sustainable forever, especially if there's no profit being made by anybody, right?
Yeah.
And
100%.
so how do we start thinking about rewarding the people that are ultimately the contributors to that value in a more fair way, and those are the types of things that I'm very interested in, and I'm kind of on a mission to like learn as much as I can
Totally.
about Web3, and
Yeah. Have you
I
heard
think this is one of the reasons why people are so willing to jump from like Facebook, Insta in favor of like a TikTok, even if they haven't figured that out or it's not an ideal model. But people are just like, what am I getting out of this? Like all my
Totally.
content is being sold to advertisers that go to shareholders. Like what's my
100%.
part?
There's yeah, no, you're very right. Have you heard about, and this is still very, very early, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Apparently there's obviously, well, there's a lot of people buying like real estate in the metaverse right now.
Yeah.
There's a variety of metaverses. There's restaurants popping up, by the way.
Yeah.
I hear there's a Domino's where you can literally go to the Domino's in the metaverse, order a pizza, and then deliver it to your house. Have you heard about that?
All that's coming.
Yeah,
All that's coming.
that's
And it's
ridiculous.
like, and I don't know how that plays out either. I mean, none of us do, but Facebook's putting a lot of money in, or Meta is putting a lot of money into it, and he's usually pretty good at staying ahead of trends.
But not just Facebook's metaverse, but there's Decentraland, and there's all these other ones.
Yeah. I don't know. It's that's another. It's infinite, right? Like there can be an
Yeah.
infinite number of metaverses, right? But which ones are actually going to get adoption, and like which ones?
Yeah.
And just like look, cryptos are a challenge. I think there's like 8 to 17,000 cryptos now. 17,000. Like people think of Bitcoin.
I don't think
like,
Facebook is going to come out the winner in this, though, to be honest with you. And I think honestly, everyone is starting to kind of just there's a strong desire to move away from Facebook, and I think that's why TikTok has such a great opportunity. Because here's the thing too, Facebook, when on Instagram they launched Reels, right? That was what they did to compete with TikTok. It is not working out for them. Let me just tell you, like it's not picking up like they were hoping it would. Like Snapchat launched Stories and they just stole that, and hey, it worked for them. People adopted it. I adopted it. I loved it. But I think it's gone to the point where there's some kind of distrust that they've created, and I think that's why the opportunity is on TikTok. But you personally, man, I would recommend get on it yourself, because you have a lot of different skill sets. It sounds like in background in so many different areas. There's no better place to build a personal brand today, by the way, in my opinion, than TikTok.
Period. I don't know. That's it. Yeah. I definitely have to spend a little bit more time doing it. And yeah, look, I think there's huge potential there for me, just from like a personal standpoint and like entertain. I mean, I've been on it. It's entertaining. Like there's no question. I think there's huge benefit for Sesame, and I think for the collective restaurant industry, always like experimenting with new channels.
100%.
There's a ton of value.
Just kind of curious, in general, again, you've done so many different things here, from working within the four walls of a restaurant to now the tech side. How do you get better in general? Any specific books you read, any mentors you looked up to, other podcasts you listen to? What are some ways that you can recommend getting better for any restaurants who are listening to this saying, holy shit, there's a lot of great stuff going on, but how do I learn some more?
Yeah. Oh my God. That's such a big topic. And I love the question, because we could do an hour on this alone, Look, I've always been a big believer in, especially recently, is like, today I have to figure out a way to be better than I was yesterday. And it could be, like I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson, who I think is a phenomenal just speaker and intellectual. I think he actually might be an intellectual of the highest order of our generation. He's a bit provocative, so people listening might hear the name and like associate it with something provocative. But he really speaks about, finding order amongst the chaos and doing things like, making your bed today, every day, like getting in that habit, because you have to set your daily routines up to do things that put you in a place where you can execute better today than you were yesterday.
I agree with that, by the way.
And I'm also I'm a fitness enthusiast. So like for me, like I've got my work life, I've got my personal life, I've got my kids, and then I've got my like own mental and physical state. And the way I tackle that is, I'm religious about going to the gym, and like I eat according to a specific way that works for me. And every day I choose to be very diligent and methodical, because I know it paves a foundation for like maximizing or optimizing like how I feel, my mental clarity, my how I feel in my body, that allows me to think about solving big problems and leading a team. And so I think health and wellness and just committing to it is huge for me. Listening to great people like Jordan Peterson, even Joe Rogan. I listened to this guy named Peter Schiff on the economics front. I mentioned I love the markets, and for me, like I've always been a little attracted and compelled by like big contrarian thinkers. So when everyone in the world is saying A, like I want to find out who's saying B.
Yeah.
And like when I find them, I kind of like latch on and I see if there's a bit of alignment or some interest there.
Totally. I mean, I think, in light to Joe Rogan, I mean, that's why he's getting so much shit right now, is because you look at all the big media and then you look at Joe Rogan and they're all saying one thing and he's saying this, right?
Exactly. And it's not, look, it ain't easy being a contrarian, right? Because you get attacked all the time. But what I like about Joe, and like, again, like I don't think anyone that listens to any podcast there needs to be some sort of presupposition that everything that's said on that podcast that you agree with. Like that's not, that goes against the mere, notion of intellectual discourse, right? Like that's the whole point of having conversations, so that we can argue and like learn and expand.
It's healthy. It's good.
It's healthy. It's like, it's how you evolve as a human, but I love that Joe, like brings on like all types of people, and like he may actually disagree with some of them, many of them might be a little bit more aligned with him, but he has the hard conversations, and like, I don't know, I just see it as like any opportunity to learn something from another perspective, whether you agree with it or not, is probably an opportunity to improve, and progress.
I totally agree. Yeah, that's why this whole cancel culture situation is just bumming me out, because like it's healthy to have these conversations where we disagree. We need more of that.
I mean, honestly, like that's the definition of tolerance, right? It's like, like there's this whole belief that, it's like one side against the other, because you're not tolerant. And like being tolerant is being able to talk to anybody and not cancel them just because they believe something that's different than, and it can be the most offensive thing, but it's okay. Like I believe I consider myself a libertarian. I'm a believer in the fundamental like liberty of individuals, and that it's like our lives to pursue. And
I'm the same way. By the way, there's not many of us here in Los Angeles, as you already know.
Yeah.
Libertarians.
Probably New York. I used to live out there a little while ago, but it doesn't shock me that there's not. But yeah, I mean, look, and honestly, like having tolerance in business, is another thing. Sometimes we get, even me, like you get so myopic and you're like, oh, the thing that I've envisioned and like that I've been working so hard for, that I know has to be right, but then something tells you like, hey, that ain't right. You got to listen to this person. And it could be like devastating to kind of like your original thesis, right? But you got to be tolerant. Like you got to like listen to the idea. You got to look at the data. You got to talk to consumers.
Well, Elon talks about this a little bit. He calls it first principles thinking, right? Like, he as it relates to like his cars, people thought, oh, well, there's not enough space in the car to have a battery strong enough that's going to actually be able to take it 200, 300, 400 miles, right? And he thought, okay, well, if we just change the shape of the batteries in such a way and did X, Y, or Z, we could do that actually. So it's like dispelling what is the status quo and thinking differently, literally. I mean, that's just what it is. And on that note, I mean, I think this is what restaurateurs need to start thinking about more about is, hey, the industry has changed. The world has changed. It's about to change even more with Web3 and crypto and the metaverse and all this crazy stuff. And it's one of those things where we are already ingrained in technology. I say humans, we're all cyborgs. And we never leave anywhere without this thing now.
I
Like
know.
we can communicate digitally now through this. It's part of us. We have digital selves now through this, and it's only going to get more and more aggressive towards that. One more
So
question for
true.
you. So Josh, let's just say if you could step into my shoes, what would have been one question that I didn't ask you that you would have asked yourself? What's one thing I missed?
Um, that's a good question. Maybe how the hell you're gonna make money.
Yeah, sure.
No, a lot of I'm used to talking to a lot of investors, and partners, and those conversations always end up going to some form of business economics,
For sure.
and it's I got to tell you it's always refreshing, or I find it refreshing to talk just greater like vision and mission and like bigger ideas, which I think that's the content that we enjoy talking about and probably
Yeah.
listeners enjoy talking about. So it's always I enjoy conversations like this for specifically for that reason.
100%,
Um,
man. Yeah, listen,
and
I mean, look, this sounds like obviously you're very passionate about it, man, and I can see it. I can feel it from you. I think that's awesome. And I'll tell you, I mean, you already sold me in the first minute. Not even, I think it was 30 seconds as you were explaining it. My light bulb just went, wow, holy crap,
yeah,
this is insane.
well, it's good to hear.
Hey, when it's available, seriously, like, and also outside of New York, let me know, please, ASAP, because I got tons of people that would love to use it.
Yeah.
I have a massive community of restaurant owners that are probably listening to this also right now. I'd be like, how do I get my hands on this? So yeah, I would love to help you push this thing, man.
Oh, no,
This,
I really appreciate the offer, and I will certainly be planning on reaching out hopefully soon. Um,
yeah, there's,
we do have some cool plans in kind of our back pocket, for like a potential national scale or some sort of secondary market launch, and we're not quite sure exactly what that looks like and exactly when it's going to happen, but it's I mean it's happening. It's not if, it's when.
there was an app I invested in actually about a year ago that is making some really cool changes right now. I think you would might be some kind of collaboration opportunity. We'll sidebar about this though.
All right,
But
sidebar.
yeah, there's I got some cool ideas that are just kind of brewing up. Um, anyway, for everyone who's listening and obviously I'm sure very interested in you now, and maybe what you guys are doing at Sesame, how can they learn more about you, Sesame, and all that? Where can they find you guys online?
Yeah, so we're available, like I said, in New York City, but you can find us on sesameorder.com. It's a web app, so you can check out our restaurants and learn a little bit about us. We're also on Instagram, which is our primary social media channel. At the handle is at Sesame Order, and yeah, coming soon to a city near you, hopefully.
I love it. I love it, man. Well, hey, Josh, thank you so much for your time today. This is super awesome. It's been a really great learning experience for me personally, and I'm sure for all our listeners. And we'll be in touch real soon, man. I can't wait to chat again.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate your time. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Enjoyed the
Chat soon, then.
conversation.